All right, everybody. So we are going to talk about our third macromolecule today, proteins. So as a reminder, we have already learned carbohydrates and lipids. Now we're doing proteins. These are all separate molecules. They are not each other. You cannot have a lipid that is a carbohydrate. You cannot have a carbohydrate that is a protein, things like that. These are all separate molecules from each other. They do have some things in common, though. They all have monomers and polymers. Their monomers and polymers are different from one another, but they all have monomers and polymers. They also all do dehydration, synthesis, and hydrolysis to build and break down polymers. And finally, they all have their own structure and function. I'm going to talk about proteins in two sections here. In this first video, we're going to talk about their monomer, the amino acid. After that, we are going to talk about how you build a protein and what proteins do. So, amino acids, they are the monomer of the protein. There are 20 different amino acids, and those 20 amino acids can combine in different ways to make different proteins. Think of it like this. When you were in kindergarten, there was probably some time when someone gave you a big bucket of those round plastic beads, and they said you could make whatever you want. Some of you probably made a keychain, and maybe it was all one color, or it was multicolor. Some of you maybe made a bracelet or a necklace, and again, it could have been all one color, multicolor, it could have had a pattern. That is what amino acids are like. There are 20 different amino acids, so there's lots of choices for how you combine them. Depending on what protein you're making, you're going to use different amino acids, and you're going to make a different size chain of amino acids. Now, we need to recognize the amino acid. We need to know what it looks like, because with proteins, I can't just treat them like carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, I was able to say, oh, they're ring-shaped. We can't do that with amino acids and with proteins because they're not that simple. They're all shaped very differently. So you have to be able to recognize an amino acid itself to know that you're looking at a protein. So to do that, there are 4 parts of an amino acid, and those 4 parts will be bonded to one central carbon atom. I wrote it in yellow on the diagram, so here's my central carbons. The 4 parts you need to know. First of all, a hydrogen atom, then an amino group, a carboxyl group, and an R group. Your hydrogen atom is just one hydrogen atom, like it's drawn here. The amino group, you have a nitrogen and 2 hydrogens. That's what's going to be in light blue. So here, nitrogen and 2 hydrogens. Your carboxyl group is a carbon, 2 oxygens, and a hydrogen. That's what's on the right here. Carbon, double bond to an oxygen, and then an oxygen and a hydrogen. And the last part, this one's kind of complicated, we call an R group. R is a variable, like how we use X in math classes. There are 20 different R groups. That would be like the 20 different colors of beads that you might have made things with when you were a kid. There are 20 different R groups that you can mix and match. And whatever the R group is, that determines what of the 20 amino acids you're working with. Now, because I'm not teaching a college biochemistry course, and I don't want to make you spend weeks learning R groups, we're just going to write R when we talk about R groups. We're just going to write R instead of drawing the whole R group. But the R group could be one molecule, and sometimes it could be something much, much larger. It depends on exactly what amino acid we're looking at. So one way or another, you all need to learn to recognize your amino acids. They will all look something like this. They've got an amino group on one side, they've got a carboxyl group on the other. Sometimes they're going to be arranged a little differently. They won't always be color-coded. The hydrogen will always be across from the R group. So whatever you need to do, remember these 4 parts bonded to a central carbon atom and learn to recognize these, because that's how you know you're looking at a protein and not some kind of carb or lipid or nucleic acid. This is what a protein's monomer will look like. Your big idea here is that amino acids are all slightly different. Your amino acids can then bond together in many different combinations to form what we call a polypeptide. We will talk about polypeptides in the next section. So for right now, you need to understand this big idea that amino acids combine in many different ways, and you need to be able to recognize a picture of it.